at exactly 8:12 on a frosty Wednesday morning. My debit card was declined over a $6 gallon of milk at Miller's Market on Sycamore Avenue in Willow Creek, Tennessee. I figured the machine was glitching. It happens, so I smiled at the cashier, apologized, and asked her to run it again. Beep. Declined. I called my husband, Warren. He answered on the third ring. And before I could even explain, he let out a short laugh, not confused. Not concerned. Just amused. Yeah, he said. That's probably not going to work anymore. 10 seconds later, I heard the phone shift hands. Then came his daughter's voice. Calm and clipped, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed in the mirror. Josephine, from now on, you'll need to ask before you spend our money. I wish I could tell you I had a sharp comeback ready. I didn't. I just stood there holding a gallon of milk while the woman at the register waited. Her expression somewhere between pity and secondhand embarrassment. I'm so sorry, she said softly. Do you want me to try a different card? I didn't have one on me. My name is Josephine Calloway. I'm 58 years old. And up until that Wednesday morning, I thought I knew exactly how my marriage worked. A man behind me shifted his cart. Somewhere near the front of the store, a toddler started crying. A little girl in the next lane tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, a little too loudly, Mommy, why won't the lady's card work? Her mother hushed her. But I felt every word land. I reached into my purse and found the emergency $20 bill I'd carried folded behind my driver's license since I was 17. My father taught me that trick: always keep enough cash to get yourself home, no matter whose company you're keeping. I never imagined I'd need it because of my own husband. Just the milk, I told the cashier, setting the bread and the eggs aside. The total came to $7 and change. I carried the small bag to my car and sat behind the wheel for a long minute before I could make my hands turn the key. This wasn't about money. Warren knew exactly how our finances worked. Because for 17 years, I was the one who ran them. Warren and I married later in life, both of us widowed once already. Both of us raising kids from marriages that had ended in grief instead of anger. We weren't chasing a fairy tale. We liked each other. He made me laugh at my own seriousness. I made him feel like someone had his back. That felt like enough. And for a long time, I spent 31 years as a director of human resources for a regional healthcare company before I retired. Budgets, negotiations, retirement plans, benefits, disputes. I understood money the way some people understand recipes. Instinctively. From years of practice. Warren always said, "You handle the numbers. I'll handle everything else." And for most of our marriage, that arrangement worked just fine. Then Warren retired 18 months ago, and something in him started to shift. It wasn't sudden. It was more like watching a hairline crack spread slowly across glass. At first, it was just questions. Why was the electric bill higher this month? Did we really need a new water heater? Small things. Reasonable things. Even. Then his daughter, Brooke, moved back to Willow Creek after her divorce. And the questions multiplied. Brooke said she only wanted to help her father stay organized. She sorted his files. She offered to manage his online banking. I welcomed it at first. I thought she was finally trying to rebuild a relationship with him after years of distance. I didn't realize she was quietly rewriting how he saw me. Instead of driving home from Miller's Market, I found myself steering toward downtown, toward a brick office building 2 blocks from the courthouse. Diane Foster had handled my late husband's estate more than a decade earlier, and I still had her number saved under Diane Trust Her. She took one look at my face and closed the folder on her desk. Josephine, what happened? I sat down and, for a few seconds, couldn't get a single word out. Finally, I said, I think my husband just let his daughter decide what kind of wife I'm allowed to be. Diane didn't rush me. She slid a box of tissues across the desk, and I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the folder I kept in my car for exactly this kind of emergency bank statements. The deed to my house, retirement paperwork, an old family trust. Years of HR work had taught me one thing above all else: document everything. Because memory gets conveniently selective once money enters the room. Diane flipped through the pages slowly. Her eyebrows climbed. She looked up at me. Josephine, whose money have they actually been trying to control? I don't think Warren even realizes. I admitted. She turned another page. Then another. Then finally set the folder down and folded her hands. Before we do anything else, she said, I need you to tell me exactly what happened at that grocery store. Word for word. So I told her. The two declined swipes. Warren's laugh. Brooke's voice coming through the phone like she had every right in the world to put me on an allowance. I repeated the sentence exactly times. You'll need to ask before you spend our money. Diane asked a string of quiet, precise questions. Had Warren told me beforehand he was restricting my access? No. Had I agreed to it? No. Did Brooke have any legal authority over any account with my name on it? Absolutely not. Then she went through the documents. The joint checking account, used for household bills. The joint savings, mostly for property taxes and repairs. And then my individual retirement account, entirely mine. My brokerage account, entirely mine. The family trust my parents had set up years before I ever met Warren. The house itself, purchased 9 years before our wedding. Paid off with money I'd earned long before he was ever in the picture. They didn't freeze everything, Diane said carefully. They froze. What they thought times was everything. Number, what I never told anyone. Diane asked about Warren's business, the custom cabinetry shop he'd run for almost 3 decades before retiring. I looked toward the window and told her what I'd never told another living soul outside that room. 6 years earlier, 2 of his biggest commercial clients had stopped paying. One filed for bankruptcy. The other dragged a disputed invoice through arbitration for the better part of a year. Between unpaid suppliers, payroll taxes, and a maxed-out line of credit, Warren was staring down almost $150,000 in debt. I used money from my own investment account. I refinanced a portion against a house that was legally mine alone. I negotiated the IRS payment plan myself, sitting on hold for hours while Warren paced the garage, unable to look at the phone. I settled his credit line for less than half of what was owed. None of it was documented as a loan. I never asked him to pay it back, because he was my husband. And that's what you do. Did Brooke know any of this? Diane asked. No. Warren didn't want anyone to know how close he'd come to losing everything. He was too proud. I remembered finding him sitting alone in the dark garage one night that year. Engine cold. Tools untouched. I can't fix this, he'd said. It was the only time in 17 years I ever heard him admit defeat. So I fixed it. Quietly. And we never spoke of it again. At the time, I called that mercy. Sitting in Diane's office, I started to wonder if it had actually just been silence. And silence had let him rewrite the whole story in his own favor. Retirement hit him harder than either of us expected. For 30 years, people had needed him: clients, employees, suppliers calling for advice. Then, almost overnight, nobody needed anything from him at all. He reorganized the garage, rebuilt the back porch steps. Then the projects ran out, and he started spending mornings in front of cable news in the same flannel shirt, complaining about his knees. That's when Brooke started coming around more. Sunday dinners. Then twice a week. Then, almost daily. I overheard pieces of it from the kitchen. Dad, You built a business from nothing. You shouldn't have to ask Josephine's permission for anything. She treats you like an employee. When I brought it up to Warren, he brushed it off every time. She's just worried about me. She's my daughter. Yosi. That sentence always ended the conversation. Diane asked one more question that made the room feel smaller. How much debt does Brooke have? I don't know exactly. A lot. She left a card statement on the counter a couple of months ago. I wasn't snooping. It was sitting out in the open. Just over $23,000 on that one card alone. She has others. Has Warren given her money? I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. Small amounts. I thought, 300 here, 500 there. From which account? The household account. Diane's pen stopped moving. This may be more than a disagreement about budgeting, she said. Restricting a spouse's access without notice, especially if a third party is directing transfers for personal benefit, can be evidence of financial coercion. We don't guess. We document. We spent almost 2 hours mapping out exactly what Warren and Brooke had touched and what they hadn't. They'd gotten into the joint household account and the shared credit card. They hadn't come anywhere near my retirement account, my brokerage account, the family trust, or the deed to the house. Diane allowed herself one small, dry smile. They've been guarding the bird feeder. Josephine, while you still own the whole farm. Under any other circumstances, I might have laughed. Diane drew up an immediate plan: revoke Warren's authorization on my individual accounts. Update my healthcare proxy. Document every transfer going back a year. And quietly prepare separation paperwork without filing anything until we understood the full picture. Nothing dramatic today, she said. No confrontation. No social media. No ultimatums. I wasn't planning one. I told her, I know. That's exactly why I'm saying it. I drove home slowly, rehearsing what I'd say to Warren. When I opened the front door, 3 flattened moving boxes were leaning against the hallway wall. More were stacked in the guest room. Brooke stood beside them, holding a black marker, smiling like we were planning a garage sale together. We're just getting things ready, she said, in case you decide to leave. Warren was sitting in the den. He heard every word. He didn't say a thing. That night I lay awake beside him while he pretended to sleep. On the dresser sat our wedding photo from 17 years earlier, both of us thinner. Both of us a little worn around the edges. Both of us looking relieved more than romantic. Like 2 people who'd finally found solid ground after separate storms. I stared at that photo and wondered if I was about to blow up my entire family over a gallon of milk. Then I remembered Brooke's voice on the phone, not the words themselves, but the certainty behind them, and I understood something I'd been avoiding for months. The milk hadn't started anything. It had simply shown me a door that had been standing open for a long time. By 6:30 the next morning, I was already dressed. Warren was in the kitchen pouring cereal. Morning, he said, like it was any other day. I poured coffee and didn't answer. You're still upset, he said. Are you? He shrugged. I think you're making this bigger than it is. It was never about the card. Warren, Brooke and I have just been talking. We want to be careful with money now that I'm retired. Careful. That word landed wrong. In 17 years, I'd never bought a designer handbag or fine jewelry. Our vacations were long weekends at state parks. I compared insurance quotes every single year and packed my own lunch every single day. If either of us had ever been careful with money, it was me. I'm going out, I said. He didn't ask where. That hurt more than I expected. Diane's office had prepared everything the night before. By 10 o'clock, we were sitting inside a branch of Heritage Trust Bank with Patricia Owens, a branch manager Diane had known for years, warm, unhurried. The kind of person who made paperwork feel less like an ending. She reviewed every document twice and confirmed everything directly with me before making a single change. These updates won't post immediately, she explained. Processing usually finishes by tomorrow afternoon. There was no drama, no raised voices, no security guard hovering nearby. Just signatures. Initials. More signatures. People imagine revenge as slammed doors and dramatic exits. Real life is quieter than that. Real life is signing your name over and over while slowly realizing your marriage is ending in a bank lobby that smells like burnt coffee. Instead of going home, I drove to my sister Grace's house on the other side of town. She opened the door before I even knocked, took one look at me, and pulled me inside without a word. I cried for the first time since Wednesday morning, not loudly. Just enough to let some of the pressure out. I never liked how often Brooke was over there, Grace said later. Over bowls of soup. I thought she was rebuilding things with her dad. So did I. What are you hoping happens? I looked into my bowl for a long time before I answered honestly. I keep hoping Warren wakes up. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sometimes people don't wake up until they lose something. Around noon, my phone lit up with Warren's name. Diane had been clear, don't answer. Not yet. The call rang out. Then another. Then a voicemail. Then Brooke's name appeared on a text. Times Dad's confused and scared. Stop trying to punish him. Warren hadn't sounded confused at the grocery store. He'd sounded amused. The next afternoon, Diane called with an update. Everything's processed. It's done. Then, almost immediately, my phone started buzzing again. Warren. Then Brooke. Then Warren again. Calls stacking on top of each other until the count read 41 missed calls by early evening. None of the voicemails said times I'm sorry. Every single one said some version of times, call me back times, or times you're overreacting. Diane called again. Her voice sharper this time. Warren tried to access one of your investment accounts online. It didn't work. Then he tried to move money using the home equity line you'd given him access to years ago. That didn't work either. No confidential information was shared. The bank simply confirmed his authorization had changed. Then she paused in a way that told me something else was coming. There's one account that slipped past our first review. A joint emergency savings fund. About $36,000. It's still jointly accessible. My stomach dropped. So Brooke could, if she convinces him to move it before we file additional protection. Legally. Yes. They could. That evening, I sat on Grace's back porch and watched the sun go down. 41 missed calls. And not one of them had asked how I was doing. For the first time since Wednesday, I understood something clearly. I wasn't trying to save my marriage anymore. I was trying to save myself. Just before midnight, Diane texted times, be at my office at 8:30 tomorrow. We may have one move left. Diane was already on her second cup of coffee when I walked in Friday morning. I filed for a temporary restraining order on the disputed savings account at 7:30. She said, sliding a printed transaction record across the desk. An attempted transfer. $32,000. Status declined. Pending restriction. Timestamp the previous evening. I closed my eyes. Warren had actually gone through with it. I don't think this was ever about needing the money. Diane said gently. I think it was about control. For the first time in days, I fully believed her. That Saturday was our neighborhood's annual fall cookout. Hosted every year by a longtime family friend named Tom Reyes. I almost didn't go. Grace insisted. Mostly because she'd already told Tom part of what was happening. And she thought hiding wouldn't help me. The moment I stepped into the backyard, I felt it, the sideways glances, the too careful smiles. Brooke had clearly been telling her version of events for days. I caught fragments as I walked past folding tables and space heaters, times hiding money. Poor guy just retired. Heard she's leaving him. Warren arrived about 30 minutes later, looking like he hadn't shaved in days. Brooke climbed out of the truck first. Chin up. Ready. We were barely through eating when Brooke stood at the picnic table with a paper plate in her hand, and the whole yard slowly went quiet around her. "I just think people should know the truth," she said. "My dad worked his whole life, and now he's being abandoned right after retirement." She turned toward me. "Josephine cut him off financially. He can't even access his own money." A few people exchanged uneasy looks. Someone asked quietly, "Is that true?" I opened my mouth, but Tom got there first. "Wait," he said, genuinely confused. "What money? I thought Josephine handled almost everything for the two of them." Brooke's smile tightened. "My dad supported them." Tom shook his head slowly. "No, not after the shop nearly went under." He looked at Warren. "You never told her." Warren's face lost all its color. "I figured everyone knew." Tom continued, almost apologetic now. "When the business was about to collapse, I helped Warren move equipment into storage while creditors were calling nonstop. Josephine negotiated with suppliers. She worked out the IRS payment plan herself. She refinanced her own time's house to cover it." He paused. "When Warren needed knee surgery and insurance wouldn't cover the difference, Josephine paid that too." Someone near the drink table murmured, "I never knew any of that." Neither had anyone else. Because I'd never told them. For 17 years I'd protected his pride and let people assume he'd rebuilt everything on his own. Not for credit. Because I loved him. Brooke turned to her father, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't say a word. Tom looked at him with something closer to sadness than anger. "You spent years letting everyone think you did it alone. The saddest part is your wife never once made you feel small for needing help." Diane arrived a few minutes later. She'd stopped by only to drop off paperwork I'd forgotten at her office, and calmly informed the group, mostly for accuracy's sake, that a temporary hearing had been scheduled for the following week regarding whether financial authority had been improperly exercised. Nothing more. No accusation. No theatrics. Just a fact. Delivered evenly. Warren closed his eyes. As people slowly drifted back to their conversations, Warren walked over and stopped about 6 feet away, close enough to talk. Too far to reach me. "I didn't think," he said, voice cracking. "I know. No. I mean, I really didn't think." Brooke said he couldn't finish the sentence. Watching him standing there, I understood something painful for the first time. My husband hadn't just believed his daughter's version of events. He'd needed times to believe it. Because it let him stop feeling guilty about everything I'd quietly carried for him. 6 days. That's how long it took to feel like 6 years. Diane warned me not to expect courtroom drama. This isn't a divorce trial. She reminded me as we walked into the county courthouse the following Thursday. It's a narrow question. Did someone cross a legal line? Warren sat at the opposite table, Brooke beside him, both of them looking smaller than I remembered. Judge Patricia Rowan entered, and the hearing began, without ceremony. Diane didn't exaggerate anything. She simply laid out a timeline: years of voluntary trust, followed by a sudden and unexplained restriction of access, followed by a declined debit card in a grocery line, followed by a text message that read, in Brooke's own words, "You'll need to ask before you spend our money." Warren's attorney called it a misunderstanding about post-retirement budgeting. The judge listened politely, then turned directly to Warren. "Mr. Ashby, when your business nearly collapsed 6 years ago, did your wife help you financially?" "Yes." "Was that money a gift? Or did she require repayment?" "A gift. She never asked for anything back." "Did she ever require your permission before paying your debts or protecting your home?" A long pause. "No." "And the $32,000 transfer attempted from your joint emergency account, were you aware it was happening?" "Yes." "Whose idea was it?" Silence stretched across the courtroom. "Brooke's." Warren finally said. "I didn't ask why. I should have." The judge signed the temporary order without much delay, full authority restored over Josephine's separate property. The disputed joint account protected pending further proceedings, and an order that neither party interfere with the other's individually owned assets. Marriage requires trust, she said, looking at Warren. Then, glancing at me, she added, so does financial partnership. Court adjourned. There were no cameras outside. No reporters, just ordinary people walking down courthouse steps. Exactly the way real life usually goes. Warren caught up with me in the parking lot. Brooke stayed several yards back, quiet for the first time in weeks. I've been trying to remember the last time Brooke and I talked about money without it being about you, he said. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing what was actually happening. I believed her. I didn't answer, because I already knew. That evening, my phone buzzed once with a new voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening. Instead, I pressed play. A few seconds of silence. Then 7 quiet words. Times, I never meant to humiliate you. Josephine. It was the apology I'd wanted for over a week. It didn't feel like victory. It just felt like finally understanding how much had already been lost. People imagine the end of a marriage as one dramatic moment, a slammed door, a signed decree, someone walking away without looking back. In reality, it arrived as a large envelope on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The judge signed the settlement this morning, Diane said over the phone. That's it. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, not the old kitchen table, but a smaller one in a 2-bedroom rental across town. 15 minutes from Grace. Small enough for just me. Big enough to still feel like a home. The settlement wasn't dramatic. And that was the point. I never asked to punish Warren. Diane had asked me early on what outcome I actually wanted. And after a long silence, I told her, I just want my life back. The court recognized what had always been true: the house stayed mine. The trust stayed untouched. My retirement stayed mine. The joint savings was split fairly. Warren kept his truck, his tools, and his own retirement funds. Nobody walked away rich. Nobody walked away ruined. It wasn't a victory. It was simply a boundary that should never have been crossed in the first place. A month later, Grace talked me into volunteering with a local senior resource center, teaching a free budgeting class every other Wednesday. One morning, a woman in her 70s raised her hand and asked, quietly, what if the person controlling your money is family? The room went still. The first thing you do, I told her, is tell someone you trust. She hugged me after class. I thought I was the only one. She whispered, I heard later, through mutual friends, that Brooke eventually filed for bankruptcy. The debt had become unmanageable once Warren stopped quietly covering for her. I expected to feel some satisfaction. I didn't. Mostly I just felt tired. She'd spent so much energy trying to control money that was never hers. And in the end, she lost something far more valuable: her relationship with her father. Warren moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Tom checked on him from time to time. Grace mentioned once that he'd gotten quiet, he barely talks anymore. I wasn't surprised. Some lessons don't arrive all at once. They settle in slowly. Like the first cold snap of the year. One Saturday morning in early spring, Warren called. I stared at his name for almost a full minute before answering. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, he said. But would you have coffee with me? I almost said no. Instead, I heard myself say, when. We met at a small coffee shop with worn wooden floors and the smell of cinnamon rolls. He was already there, standing when I walked in. A nervous smile in place of the easy one I used to know. I've replayed that morning at Miller's 1,000 times, he said quietly. I wish you could erase it. I can't. You know what finally hit me? It wasn't Brooke that surprised me. I made my own choices. I kept blaming her because it hurt less than blaming myself. He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. When I retired, I stopped feeling useful. You were still solving problems. Still had a plan for everything. And I suddenly couldn't fix anything at all. I think I confused being in control with being respected. That sentence stayed with me. Because I could trace exactly where it had started, not the day Brooke moved back. Not the day he retired. But long before that. One small decision at a time. Until he'd quietly forgotten that a marriage was never a scoreboard. It was never about $6 and change. I told him, I know. He said, it was about the moment I stopped seeing you as my partner. We didn't hold hands. I reached across the table and touched his for just a second. I hope you find peace. Warren. His eyes filled. You too. I stood first. He didn't ask me to stay. And he didn't ask for another chance. That told me he'd finally understood something. True respect can't be demanded. Trust can't be controlled. And love doesn't survive in a place where permission has replaced partnership. A few weeks later, I stopped by that same Miller's Market for nothing more dramatic than milk, bread, and bananas. The price of milk had gone up again. I smiled anyway and set it in my cart. At the register, I slid my card through the reader. The cashier handed me my receipt with an easy smile. Have a great day. You too, I said. And I meant it. I walked out into the sunshine carrying one small grocery bag. And it felt like the simplest thing in the world. Looking back now, I understand that morning at the checkout line didn't end my marriage. It only revealed what had already been happening for a long time. Sometimes life doesn't change because of one enormous moment. Sometimes it changes because one ordinary Wednesday finally shows you a truth you'd been trying very hard not to see. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, I hope you chose yourself or that one day. You will. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope our paths cross again soon.